You're not really ready until you're safe. Summer safely and drive calm.
Time to upgrade your adventure with an RV from Motorsportsland. Don't put off making exciting memories and exploring the many outdoor hideaways right here in Utah. Come in today and see how Motorsportsland can help you get away, or visit motorsportsland.com.
This is A Woman's View on KSL News Radio. Robin Scribner is with me, co-founder of Tech Moms, and Dr. Tamara Sheffield is here, medical director of community health and prevention with Intermountain Healthcare. I saw a headline this week that just, once in a while I'll see something and I'll think, wow, the United States is truly different from some other countries, especially China. When I saw this headline, it sort of took my breath away. I forget once in a while. I start to take for granted that we are like other places in the world. But when I saw the headline that China is now allowing couples to have 3 children if they like, I had forgotten, because it had not been in front of me, that once upon a time they were only allowed to have 1 child. I'm sure many of our listeners will remember that that was the rule. And then a few years ago, they were allowed to have a 2nd child. Well, now, because their population is decreasing and they don't have enough people to in the workforce to care for their aging population, now they are allowing couples to have 3 children. That just took my breath away, Dr. Sheffield, because it reminded me just how different we are. Did it have any effect like that on you?
Yeah, it made me think back to a friend of mine who was from China, and she was actually a 3rd child. And what happened was she described the fact that there's still a class system there, and her family had wealth and had upper class, and you were allowed to pay the government to have more children. So essentially, if you paid the fees and then paid for your child's education and paid for other things, you were allowed to have more than just the 1 child or the 2 child in those things. And so, to a certain extent, there is some capitalistic features to it that aren't so different than others. But the fact that it's controlled so terribly, we talk about, there's so many things that we worry about our freedoms being infringed upon, and oh my goodness, we have so many more ability to make our own choices than many other countries still have controls over.
That's exactly how I felt. And thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know that. That's interesting. What did you think, Robin?
Well, I was fascinated by this story, and it just reminded me about how some large-scale policies can have such different side effects than they had planned on. I remember reading an article by Dr. Valerie Hudson, who studied the negative effects of the one-child policy in China and the fact that there was a selection for male children. And so there were millions of males in China who became of marrying age and not any women for them to marry, and it caused all sorts of increased crime and all these other factors. And I, at the time, this was maybe 15, 20 years ago, thinking that was a policy that was ill-conceived and poorly executed, and it came with really, really terrible ramifications. It just goes to show, whenever we're making large-scale policies and seeking to achieve one, it is so imperative that we understand the broader ramifications, because we can cause a lot of problems putting strict controls on some areas of our life.
For a population to be able to just continue to be at its same level, you need about a birth rate about 2.1, and we're seeing worldwide that shift down. Worldwide, we are below that rate, and we will be decreasing as a world population. And here in the U.S., we're around 1.7 children per woman. And so what you're seeing is we will also deal with some of those economic concerns. And part of this is our personal choices, and it has dramatically changed in the last decades. And so over time, we will see a decreasing world population.
Now that is so interesting too, Dr. Sheffield, because I think many people believed for a long time, and perhaps were correct in believing some years ago, that overpopulation was a problem for the world. That's not the case anymore, I guess.
No, that is not. There's still some countries that are having that do struggle with the population numbers that are expanding. And what we're seeing is that many countries are asking for immigration to come in to help deal with their decreasing population, decreasing tax abilities to actually support the infrastructure of the countries.
So immigration is the thing that helps us because we're below the 2.1 child per woman that's needed to sustain the population.
Correct.
That's so interesting. Okay, I want to ask you about one other topic before we take a break, and that is, have you followed at all some of the state voting policies that have been changing around the country? And then there is this For the People Act that's being considered in Washington that the Democrats have proposed and that the Republicans are against, that has some, what the Democrats would call some basic protections for access to the vote, but that Republicans would say is a manipulation by the Democrats. It's all very political, Robin, but have you followed this?
I have been following it a little bit, and I am always very interested in our redistricting policy and the way we're doing it. And I was glad to see our redistricting committee here in the state of Utah, some fabulous people on it who I know are going to work really hard to make sure everything's fair. Amanda, what struck me most about this whole issue was how there's almost nothing that we can talk about in the political arena right now that I trust, that because everything is so politicized, every single is skewed to one side. It's very, very hard, even for an intelligent person who's willing to do some research, to really understand what's going on.
Isn't that frustrating that when you can read what's in the bill, you can read what the Democrats say about the bill, but then when you read what the Republicans say, you think, are they talking about the same bill? Because it would seem to be exactly the opposite of what you've just read about the bill.
That was my reaction precisely. I mean, one of the things in the op-ed recently that came in the Deseret News that talked about how important it was for redistricting to be done by elected leaders. It's always been my impression that elected leaders should not be doing the redistricting. There's the old saying, legislators should not choose the voters. It should be voters choosing the legislators. That's a gerrymandering little pithy quote there. But that's one of the issues that we're facing, is a disagreement over who should be choosing these panels that make the decisions about redistricting, all the voting rights acts that are coming out in terms of this last election and a response to it. We read an article this morning about a University of Utah professor saying we've got serious threats to democracy because of all these new laws coming out in every state. And again, every issue is so politicized, it is very hard to understand who to trust.
Do you follow this at all, Dr. Sheffield?
I follow even more the local, some of our local concerns that we've had. But really, what I do see in these issues as each of these laws come forward, and the question I have to ask myself is this law protecting a party, is it protecting power within that party, or is it protecting the rights of that person that lives next door to me? And those are the things I try to use to judge it, because so much of this is power protection. Even in our own state, we've had that argument about the ability to, for primaries and to have a candidate come in, keep my vote, keep my voice, all of that argument of, does the party get to choose who runs, or can a person get enough individuals to sign a petition for them to be the ones to be able to run in an area? And I look towards saying, I don't think party leadership should be the ones to make the decisions for the whole population. And I think the more parties try to get centralized control and control the voting rights, the more we're going to shift towards not a two-party system, and other parties will keep popping up because people feel disenfranchised when party leadership takes the control away from them.
My concern is, I've always believed that the more people who vote, the better. And I don't understand why that is a partisan question. Isn't democracy a better thing when more people vote? We've always wanted that for other countries. When we look at another country, we say, 80% of their population voted. Magnificent. And wouldn't we want that for ourselves? So when we look at an election that had a larger percentage of the vote, and we should do what we can to make sure it's secure, certainly, but whatever we can do to have more access to the vote, and I think in Utah, we've really done a great job and could be a model for the nation. I don't understand why that is partisan. Can either of you explain that to me?
For the first time, I'm seeing things that we've criticized in other countries happening in our own country, where we are now, fighting election processes the rules that we've set up and the process that we've set up is being challenged. And I don't see it as something that's trying to create more freedom. I see it as something of people trying to keep power and control. And the way our Constitution is written for individuals who believe in freedom and who will act without being constrained to act appropriately. So there are abilities for people to act inappropriately because we give people so much freedom in our country. And I hope we can have enough good people of good intent that we can trust to keep having this kind of government. But you have to have people of good intent. If you start having individuals who do not have good intent and who want to take power, that is when we start seeing a breakdown in our government structure.
Robin.
That was such a powerful way of putting it, Dr. Sheffield. Thank you so much. I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that on the surface, the two different groups are saying that they're solving a problem that the other one doesn't see as a problem. So Democrats say we want to create these laws to avoid voter suppression, and Republicans say we want to create these laws to avoid voter fraud. And either side is saying the problem that you say is not happening. The problem that you're trying to solve is not happening, but both sides are seeing problems or saying they're seeing problems that they're seeking to solve. I think that's how it becomes a partisan issue.
Well said. We'll take another break. Back with my guests, and I'll ask them for some advice for the class of 2021, if you'll let me do that, ladies. Dr. Tamara Sheffield and Robin Scribner with me on A Woman's View. Back in a moment.